one combination.
And you said you was trying it out. How's that working?
It's working pretty well if I do it. You probably can't see it. I've got a little spot here on my face I'm working on.
It is.
And is it skin cancer? I don't know.
Yeah, they can.
But at my age and the way it looks, it probably is. So I'm going to treat it because it costs almost nothing to treat it.
Right.
It's totally safe. So should I go get a biopsy?
Just plain castor oil takes off a lot of the skin cancer,
Yeah.
but that stuff you gave me, the urine?
Urea?
Urea, yeah.
Yeah, that's what he was asking.
Well, yeah,
about.
that worked great. I just used a little needle and injected it. I had some skin cancer and it made it go right away.
Yeah, if you do it. But most of these things, you don't take it very seriously. Doesn't hurt. And no one comments about my beauty, so I'm not too concerned about it. But
I'm not heard anything.
The thing is, and we always get back to this. You got to learn to douse.
Yes.
You got to learn to use some sort of intuitive testing, or you go crazy.
That's right.
A fellow called me today, and I'm kind of surprised he's still alive, but he has some sort of a bladder tumor.
Okay.
And he bleeds, and the doctors want to cut out his bladder, and he doesn't want to cut out his bladder. And so he's been catheterizing himself, and he's been doing a baking soda for a while. And I first saw him a year ago, and he was having this trouble, and he just called me today. He's still having, he's a little bit worse, but he's a year, and he still has his bladder. But anyway, so we talked about a few things, but there's just so many things, Are you going to do Laetrile or baking soda, or are you going to put urea in there, you can use DMSO, you can go a little bit crazy. But if you just, before you get into that situation, if you would develop some confidence in your ability to get these answers yourself. You learn to douse, or you learn to do back and forth, or you use your muscle testing, or whatever you want to do, but get something going for yourself.
Yes, sir.
Now. Don't wait.
Mm-hmm.
And then call me and say, what should I do? Now I'm going to say, well, what should you do? Anyway, I just thought I'd bring this up as we begin, because we're not necessarily talking about vitamins today, but this is an article from 2 or 3 years ago, and someone went through the U.S. Poison Control Center and the American Association of Poison Control Centers, and they recorded all the deaths due to vitamins.
Yeah.
Now you got to keep in mind we're talking about as opposed to pharmaceuticals, which is probably the number 2 cause of death. Iatrogenic disease in this country, doctors killing people.
Yeah.
Second leading cause of death. I think it's overtaking cancer now.
I've heard that.
Wow.
And so when people say, oh, you better not take your vitamins, or oh, that's a whole lot of a vitamin, no recorded deaths from vitamins going back to 1983.
Wow.
Now, they don't have 2014 and 2013 yet recorded, but from 1983 to 2009 here, no recorded deaths from taking vitamins. Now, they aren't totally harmless, but your odds, so when you talk about, anyway. But your doctor says this, and it's scary, so you've got to be confident. So, what do we do? I just got a call from a close friend the other day, and I'm sure you have too. I can't think of what I want to say. I can't remember what you told me. All right? I don't remember what I was supposed to. Am I the only one that hears that? Or are you experiencing it?
There's a thought about this that might be helpful to do for kids. They give them Adderall to brighten up their
Sure.
brain, or cocaine.
Oh.
Maybe that would be a good start.
Well, I think probably marijuana would probably help too. I'm joking. Okay, we're
We
going to do
do
a little self-evaluation here now.
Yeah.
We're going to count backwards from 100 by sevens. And I'm going to point to one of you, and you do it. You say one, then I'll point to the next person, you say the next one. Okay? Okay, let's start over here in the corner. You got each one. No, that's overstated. Okay, 100 minus 7. Okay, 93 minus 7. Okay, 93 minus 7.
It's 86.
Okay, 86 minus 7.
78.
Well, close.
Close.
79.
Well, and 79 minus 7. That's the easy one.
Okay, 79 minus, what was it?
We're counting by
No,
sevens,
no, no,
Tom.
what was the number? Because I answered.
Well, what's the right answer? 86 minus 7.
79.
Okay, good. So you can see that even with something relatively simple, we aren't real good. We struggle. And so here again, it's always a good idea, I think, if you're going to do something and you've got some ideas in mind that is what you want the results to be, that you have some sort of a way to be objective about it. And I've included here a little, towards the back, a little experiencing, the very back page turned over, experiencing cognitive decline. Just a simple little test you can administer yourself. Probably better if you administer it with a friend or someone you live with and get their opinion about how you're doing.
I wasn't very good at math when I was a kid.
Well, maybe you started declining early. Okay, you forget what you're looking for. People think you're forgetful. Forget the names of people you should know. Those are the sort of things. You repeat yourself, tell the same joke to the same people 3 or 4 times. Good friends will tell you, I've heard that. but take something like, and you can go online, and there's, I think I've given you the websites that you can go to, and they have other types of tests that you can do. Somewhere in here, I think I've put ways of, but you can give yourself a score, and then go back in 6 months, 3 months, or whatever, and do it again. Because if you just say, well, I wonder how I'm doing right now, it's hard to be objective. And this will give you some bit of objectivity. If you score, you get them all right, then you need a tougher test. Because none of us are quite as sharp as we used to be. And then you can implement some things and write down what you've started, when you started it, and then redo the test. But that'll give you something objective to put in your journal. Okay. Ask your, here I put it right in the first paragraph. The mini mental state exam. You just Google it online. And here's another one, luminosity.com. It's a little website that has ways to, it's sort of like brain exercises. And they always say if you like crossword puzzles, or if you like Sudoku, is that how you say that? That way of, I think that's kind of a senseless game. Anyway, number of relationships. It helps you see relationships. But here's a couple. Read upside down occasionally. What's frustrating about that is we're used to reading at the same speed, at a certain speed. You turn upside down, you slow down for a while. But it's good for your brain. It challenges your brain. And that's what we need. We get, I'm coming to the conclusion that having a one-level home is not good for your health.
True.
Because climbing stairs is great exercise. And now we're learning that what they call interval exercise is much better for you than running long distances. Short, intense bursts of speed, climbing a flight of stairs quickly is a short, anyway, just a theory. But do something on a regular basis, just like any other sort of form of exercise. Okay, now the next thing is stress management. Now everybody says that, and it's hard to manage your stress. Because if it's easy, it wouldn't be stressful, right? And there's some things you have no control over.
True.
And you've got to learn to accept, what's that old saying my granddad used to always say? Change the things you can, recognize what you cannot change, and be smart enough to know the difference. Are you going to impeach Obama, President Obama? Probably not. You know, are we going to change the income tax, the IRS? Probably not. So get over it. If you have a chance to help change those things, do it. But learn to say, I better not fight the IRS. It's going to be a little too stressful. You may have a spouse or a child that doesn't want to change. You aren't going to change your kids after they get about 3 years old. You don't have much control of it. And the reason for that is when things are stressful, your cortisol level goes up. Cortisol accelerates aging when it's prolonged, elevated for a long period of time. So you want to try and minimize your exposure to cortisol. And that's a stress. You know, quit jumping out of airplanes. Quit skydiving, those things that raise your adrenaline real quickly.
There was a doctor named Jeffries that wrote a book called Safe Uses of Cortisol. And I read that book and I thought it made a lot of sense.
It does. But see, there's a total difference between pharmacologic levels of cortisol and physiologic levels. And Jeffries emphasizes replace what your body would normally produce.
Okay.
And that's different than what most people experience when they are constantly eating sugar or going without sleep or living with an abusive partner, that sort of thing. Okay. Now, a thing that I think is critical is that your brain cells are much more sensitive to cortisol when you are magnesium deficient. Neurosurgeon of the name of Blaylock wrote a great book called Excitotoxins. And he pointed out that a lot of these things in our diet are what we call excitotoxins, like MSG and some food colorings and food additives, artificial sweeteners. They stimulate brain cells dramatically, quickly. And your brain cells, if they get overstimulated, they will die, and they're much more susceptible to excitotoxins when you are magnesium deficient. So take more magnesium. If you can figure out a way to get magnesium shots, do it. Get a spray bottle with a little magnesium chloride in it.
Yes.
And after you get out of the shower, the bathtub, spray some on yourself.
Yes.
You know, the guys that promote this say you ought to spray it on your body, and boy, it's really sticky. And you have to rub and rub and rub, and it finally goes away. But if you spray it under your arms, 2 or 3 sprays every day, twice a day, whatever, when you go to bed, whatever, it isn't a problem. And it's another way to get magnesium in you.
I told this one guy about it, and he took, the magnesium, sprayed all over his body, and really soaked a lot in. Apparently he got too toxic.
Oh, what are the side effects of too much magnesium? Loose stools or low blood pressure? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I would question that.
So his ongoing thing was, he's a person who has bipolar. And then he decided after he talked to his doctor that he stopped doing that.
Well,
so what he did,
okay. Well, we don't want to spend too much time on these anomalies. Most of us aren't going to get toxic from magnesium. So find ways. Find one you tolerate. Take yourself to bowel tolerance. If you don't like the pills, take the powder. It's wonderful stuff. And as you read, the more you read about it, and just read most recently, it'll help normalize blood sugars. It helps increase your insulin sensitivity. And it slows down aging in your brain. Okay, then melatonin. They're using melatonin for a wide variety of things now. Traditionally, for the last 30 years or so, it's been a sleep aid, a safe sleep aid. It's a hormone that's released by, I think, pituitary gland, I'm not sure which gland. And it raises in your body, starts going up about 10 o'clock at night. then it peaks about midnight, then it tapers off. Well, unfortunately, we don't encourage the production of melatonin because light suppresses melatonin release. And so when it starts to get dark, we turn on the lights. We think we're so smart. But we can stay up longer, but that's why I think one of the reasons people that work graveyard shifts or their shifts are constantly rotating, their brains get out of rhythm. So if you have to stay up late, supplement yourself with melatonin. The melatonin helps improve brain function, stress reduction. If life is really stressful for you, learn about emotional freedom, the emotional freedom technique, EFT. It's a great way to help manage stress. They're using it when it's applied properly and with the right intensity. It overcomes all sorts of mental disorders, PTSD, and all these things we normally just medicate people for. It's not as easy to apply. You know, a doctor just has to write a prescription for some of these things. EFT, you have to train people. It's not that difficult, though. It's not that difficult. But you can look, you can Google it. You can get there's books and there's online courses you can do. Okay, what are the things in our environment that accelerate aging of the brain? All sorts of things. I just recently posted on the email about sources of fluoride that we don't suspect.
Oh.
Fluoride is toxic to our brains. More and more, you've seen studies that show it reduces IQ in kids, among other things. Get rid of fluoride. Even Weimar now, you can get a water deal, a water dispenser for about $100, and you get water that doesn't have fluoride in it, and then figure out what other possible sources of fluoride you may be exposed to. It's toxic stuff, and I don't care how many cities, here in this country we're saying we want the companies to label GMO foods. Well, in Europe they're saying we're banning it. So you don't have to worry about labels. We are just not going to allow GMO foods in our country. But because of the politicians in America and their susceptibility to bribes and they were trying to get, and we can't even get companies to label GMO foods. And it's kind of the same way with fluoride. Why would a community put fluoride in their water? Because someone had a lot of money to propagandize and convince people that it was going to prevent tooth decay. It's a lie. It doesn't. Okay, so try and avoid, get rid of the cookware. Get rid of your aluminum cookware, unless you use it just occasionally. Lead, if you live in an older home, you've got to be a little bit cautious about lead solders and things like that. Try and get chemicals out of your environment. I would not buy new carpets. I would not use room fresheners. Be cautious about dry cleaning your clothes, about our synthetic clothing, all these chemicals we use to try and make our life safer and healthier and more pleasant. Most of them are toxic. And speaking of that, many of the toxins we're exposed to, our brain is exposed to, come from our gut. And if you're at all familiar with the gut and psychology syndrome, you realize that 80+% of our immune system's in our gut. The chemicals that our brain uses to regulate itself come from our gut, if it's healthy. And very few of us have a healthy gut. Someone thinks they have a healthy gut, come up here, we'll muscle test you and see how healthy your gut is. I knew I wouldn't get any takers. But so you gotta just consider that your gut is somewhat toxic. Now when we talk about digestion, elimination, we talk about things you can do to rehabilitate your gut. What was one of those things? That's not fair. Kurt can tell me.
What was the question?
What is something you can do to help improve the health of your, what they call it, your microbiome? Crowd. Wait,
Yes, yes.
that's a standard question that's always right in this class. Tom, you had a question?
Probiotics.
Probiotics, yeah. Kraut is a great source of probiotics. If you can rehabilitate the gut environment, the gut flora, we call it, you can know a whole lot about improving your brain health. Because like we talked about last week or the week before, many of the chemicals abnormal bacteria produce in your gut are narcotics. They're opioids, which are in the same class as heroin and morphine. And they damage your brain. So, anyway. So, and then the other thing is we want to make sure we're not constipated. Because we constipate, we're recycling the chemicals and the materials our body's trying to get rid of. And so, hope you all remember how to measure your transit time. You know what a healthy bowel movement looks like and feels like. That's very important for your brain. There's a poem called The Ode to a Stool, and it's mainly for older people. And I think the last line or so goes something like, all my daily cares and woes depend on how my BM goes. And there's a lot to that. A lot of people get fixated on their bowel movement because usually they have trouble. Okay. Now, medication. Now, what can you do to get rid of any medication you're on? See, now your doctor is very, very reluctant to take you off medication, especially if another doctor put you on it because of the legal environment we've created. And so that's a responsibility you've got to take on yourself. If you're diabetic, you've got to get Tanton's book. You've got to listen to what I have to say. You've got to get on. You've got to find out how to get rid of your diabetes so you don't have to take the medication. That's your job. Okay, and look in your mouth. If you got junk in your mouth, you get junk in your gut. Mercury kills things. And if you have mercury in your mouth, you're going to kill healthy bacteria. So, I just read I get a prostate cancer little weekly newsletter. And the doctor that writes the column in there, he said, it doesn't matter what's in your mouth. A little bit of mercury is not going to hurt you. Well, for a lot of us it won't. For people that have chronic illness, it definitely could. And it's a poison. No one would argue that it's a poison. But some people say, you tolerate a little bit of it. Maybe. Okay. Another critical thing is hormone balance. And we talk about this almost every class. You've got to get your thyroid working properly. You've got to take care of the things that encourage. What's one thing that will help most people's thyroid work better, or your body to work better with thyroid? Iodine. Great. Now I should say, how many of you are taking iodine? Good. Hey, I'm somewhat successful. Almost everybody needs it. Almost. I was visiting with family this past weekend, and one of the older people there had just had prostate cancer, and his dad had prostate cancer. So I was talking to the son, and he wanted to know, what's something I can do to avoid prostate cancer? And the first thing that came to mind, iodine. So, here again, what's the risk of taking iodine? I'm not sure there is one. Oh, sure. If you drink the whole bottle every day. I'm not common. What's the cost of taking 10, 15 milligrams of iodine a day? Nickel? Maybe. It's cheap, and that you're never going to hear it. You ever see an ad on TV at 8 o'clock at night? Take your iodine?
No.
No, you never see that.
Where do you get iodine at?
Pardon?
Where do you get iodine at?
Hey, I'm going to just have something to sell you. You can get it online.
Or here.
You go Google Luga. 10 years ago, you had to have a prescription to get Lugol solution. Nowadays, you don't. And here again, it's very, very safe. And it neutralizes, it helps your body metabolize estrogen effectively. So it lowers your estrogen along with cortisol. When they're out of balance, they accelerate aging. I just put a blurb about deep vein thrombosis. One of the risk factors that put you at higher risk is if you're taking some sort of birth control pills, estrogen, or some sort of hormone replacement, usually estrogen. That makes your blood more likely to clot. Abnormal platelet stickiness. Estrogen, that's one of the things estrogen does. So, anyway, iodine helps keep your estrogen levels low.
Isn't just taking kelp, seaweed?
Well, sure it is.
About the right
but
amount?
at your age, Dan, you need a whole lot more than
more
that.
than that?
You're behind the 8 ball. See, if you've been eating kelp all your life, you'd be getting iodine. If you've been, unfortunately, they used to condition commercial bread products with iodine until about 1960. Then they stopped it. I don't know the reason for it. And then for a while there, anybody that had high blood pressure, they told them, don't eat salt, which is another possible source of iodine. Back in the early 1900s, I think it was, there was a goiter belt in this country. And all the people in the Midwest, because they didn't get much exposure to seaweed or seafood or salt water, they had goiters. They finally figured out it's an iodine deficiency. And so then they started iodizing salt. And so now we think, oh wow, this salt's iodized, it must be good stuff. Well, it's better than the regular stuff, which is not really salt, it's sodium chloride. and so most of us are not getting iodine in our diet. But then they chlorinated the water, which competes with iodine. And then they fluoridated the water, which competes with iodine. So you've got bromine and fluoride competing with your iodine deficiency, which just exaggerates it. So, of course, test yourself, but take iodine. I have a family history of breast cancer. My mother, her sister, my grandmother, pretty strong. And so my nieces and sisters, I said, take iodine. Dr. Derry wrote the whole book, Breast Cancer and Iodine, but he could have also said prostate cancer and iodine. So they're very similar in their hormonal makeup and response patterns. So iodine, take it. It does so many other good things. These E. coli, these breakouts of E. coli because people eat tainted meat. Well, if you're iodine deficient, iodine kills things. Remember, water purification, what's that tablet made of? Iodine. If you take iodine, you can get rid of most bladder infections. But if your body doesn't have enough iodine, you don't sterilize stuff that comes into your gut. So then when there's a few pathogens in it, like most commercial meat has, well, your body doesn't have the protective mechanisms to get rid of those things. And so you're much more susceptible to E. coli infections or salmonella or listeria or whatever else happens to be coming on. Okay, so thyroid is very, very important. When in doubt, just take some. That's how my feeling. Take your testosterone and progesterone levels. Again, if you read about the benefits of testosterone therapy, and there was one poorly done study which showed, it took a bunch of guys with proven heart disease and gave them big doses of testosterone and said, oh, gee, they're more likely to have another heart attack. Well, come on, that's a stupid study, and it's basically designed to discourage the use of testosterone. Testosterone is one of the most beneficial hormones for maintaining good health in men and women. It reduces your risk of dementia. It reduces your risk of diabetes and depression. But it's tough to get because doctors read headlines, but you can do a lot for yourself if you know how to go on the Muscle Builder websites and you'll learn how to boost your testosterone levels. You can get a blood test done. Go down here, any lab test now, and get a blood test. Find out what your free testosterone level is. The doctors, if you talk him into ordering it, make sure he orders your free testosterone, not total testosterone. But that's misleading. Can be anyway. Okay. And here again, because of the condition we call estrogen dominance, it's almost pervasive and almost ubiquitous in our culture because of environmental chemicals, synthetic things we eat, thyroid deficiency. Almost all of us also need progesterone. As estrogen is kind of an aging, increases your, like, for example, increases the stickiness of your blood and more likely to clot. Progesterone is the balancer. And since we're getting estrogen-like effects from sugar and environmental chemicals and fat cells, most of us are going to benefit from taking progesterone. Great stuff. It won't enlarge your breasts. But you know how many older men you see that need a bra? You know, they have big breasts and big fat hips. From what? From estrogen and thyroid deficiency and iodine deficiency. Because their hormones are just shifting. Okay, avoid synthetic and avoid environmental chemicals. Yeah, nail polish and makeup and all this stuff. It's a constant struggle in my family. I got an 11-year-old daughter, and she has her older daughter put on makeup. So boy, she's gonna put on her makeup. It just drives me crazy. So I give her lots of iodine, hoping to neutralize some of the estrogen-like effect of those things. Will it work? I don't know. That's the thing. You've got to study this stuff. You've got to become converted. I'm one person out here in the wilderness, and you're going to get all this other stuff that from people that do not agree with me. So you've got to figure out for yourself, and you've got to feel good about doing these things. Number one, you won't do them. You won't take the time or spend the money or whatever. But you can get on the conveyor belt and go down the path of traditional medicine. Okay. Okay, so here, what do we do about your brain? Your diet and your brain. Well, we've touched on that just a little bit. Go back. I put this, I think I did. Now, look at this picture. This should be, part of every bit of every medical education. Now, if you look at this picture on the left-hand side, penmanship changes induced by a drop of the food extract under the tongue of this individual. That's all it is. It's called sublingual testing. And 20 years ago it was quackery. Now gradually it's getting a little more mainstream. You know the pattern. The professors have to die before anything changes. Professors don't very often change their mind unless it's their own research. Okay, this little girl, this top line of the handwriting, you can see this is how she had the ability to draw, right. Now, when she is exposed to just one drop of a very dilute solution of potatoes, look what happened to her handwriting. Now, what's going on here? Is all of a sudden she become dyslexic? No. Grossly, her brain didn't change at all, except biochemically, something's going on. Now think about a bee sting allergy. How much bee venom does it take to kill a person that has a bee sensitivity?
One.
You can't even see it. The bee injects very, very, very minute amounts of that venom, and immediately, almost, the whole body reacts. How does that work? It's energy, folks. It's just energy. And that's why we have this class on energy medicine. It's all basically some form of energy. So the body gets the signal that this isn't good stuff, and depending upon the target organ of your sensitivity, that's another concept that's difficult for many people to accept. We all may have milk allergies, but it hurts your gut, you get asthma, you get a rash, you get diarrhea, you get headaches, all from the same thing. And for these kids like this, and this is not rare, foods affect the brain. The brain is the target organ, and the brain can be the target organ all the life. We chuckle when someone says, "Well, this cough I've had for the past few weeks couldn't be due to cigarettes because I've smoked for 40 years. It never bothered me." We say, "Oh, come on, get serious." But we all know that tobacco is cumulative. Why can't potato allergy be cumulative? Or why can't our ability to cope with that? This is where the safe use of cortisone comes in. Our adrenal glands, because of chronic stress, get weak. We don't have enough vitamin C. We don't have enough of the B vitamins. And now our adrenal gland can no longer produce enough cortisone to suppress the allergic reaction.
Also, I understand that taking thyroid puts more stress on your adrenals, too.
If you take too much.
Right.
Now, thyroid, if you don't have a, see, it's Goldilocks. Why did your mother tell you the story of Goldilocks? You never thought about that, have you? You forgot about Goldilocks. Goldilocks has a huge moral. And what is it?
The right.
We better
the
tell
right-
that story. We'll
the
start
right
again.
fit.
The real beginning. What?
The right fit.
It's the right amount. See? And that's what Linus Pauling tried to, and the whole Orthomolecular Medical Society is trying to teach us that you don't want it too hard or too soft or too hot or too cold. You want it just right.
Too big
And
or too
Papa
little.
Bear wanted one thing, Mama Bear wanted something, and the little baby bear needed a different
Yeah,
amount,
yeah.
different temperature, and that's your body. See, and so if you get too much cortisol, that's not good. If you get too little, that's Jeffrey's whole thesis. You want the right amount. And see, and so when we get too much stress throughout our life, malnutrition, the adrenal gland is malnourished, and so it can't produce any more. You finally reach this point where you cannot cope with that reaction your body's had for many, many years to potatoes or milk or whatever, and so you start getting symptoms. And for some of us, the symptoms are depression, irritability, we lose motor skills like this little girl did. She lost her motor skills. And you see, it's not just potatoes, milk. She started writing backwards. Now, what if every day this girl, her parents were struggling, so she got a free breakfast. And what's the free breakfast? Well, the dairy industry is just wonderful because they supply the milk at a cut rate. And she got milk and cereal and probably chocolate milk. The kids sometimes don't like to drink regular milk, so we'll make it even better. She drank chocolate milk every day, and then she went to school and tried to write, and it was backwards. So for the rest of her life, she's handicapped. The rest of her life.
I've been wondering.
Kurt, maybe that's the clue.
That could be.
For
'cause
you?
I had nothing but potatoes, gravy, milk.
Well, stay away from that early morning sausage and biscuit breakfast you got over at Dairy Mine.
I have.
Okay, so you go down here and see it isn't just foods, it's chemicals. It's the last two are molds. And so a kid like this may have a lot more trouble in the winter months. Or if they lived in Oregon, it's pretty much all year round, except we get a couple hot months in the end of the summer. But who can complain about the weather in Oregon? Come on. Look at Chicago. Look at my son in Glendive, Montana, 20 below zero. Luke says, come visit. Anyway, but in Oregon we have mold pretty much all year round, and when it finally goes away, we water our lawns so it comes back. So if this was a mold sensitivity, see, and these little kids are born stressed. Kids these days are born stressed. We kind of tend to think, well, why? A relative at this gathering this last weekend was pregnant, and they have 2 or 3 girls, and the dad saying, I really want a boy. Now, if that baby is a girl, she hears that. She gets that energy. And so before she's even born, she's stressed. You know, see, we aren't nearly sensitive enough to the reality of our world. And so you got to be real careful. Okay. And on the other side of the page is just the way this child or a similar child drew under the same sort of exposure. And that's really the beauty of homeopathy. If you took the child like this, most of the time, if you give them a homeopathic dose of this stuff under their tongue, it reverses that. It's amazing. And here again, that's the beauty of urine therapy. We won't. You can't distract me. You start talking about urine therapy right now. Okay. Let's go back, if we can, a couple of pages. I think we've talked enough about food and fun. Now, the other thing we talked about, foods are going to be a bigger problem for most people because if you don't digest your food thoroughly, they're more likely to become reactive. And so life isn't real simple. So not only do you have to eat properly and digest it properly and have a healthy environment for your food is processed and eliminate it properly. So you can't just take probiotics and think everything's going to be fixed. Sure, that will help. But if you don't have a good set of teeth, or if you aren't chewing your food thoroughly, or if you're eating poor quality food, it's a kind of a challenge. But it's not an emergency in most cases. That's the beauty of it. It's not an emergency. So you don't have to throw up your hands and say it's just too much. You can take one thing at a time. You can change your eating habits. You can gradually get rid of the junk in your diet. You can gradually work on your digestion. You can learn to make kraut. And even if it takes you 6 months, you'll be better off. You can do your basal temperature. You can start taking iodine. You just do what you can do, and you'll get better.
I always thought yogurt was good for your digestive enzymes and stuff too.
It is.
Okay.
But what have they done commercially to yogurt now? Most yogurt's loaded with sugar and a bunch of other stuff. It's good. I like it.
They have the other kind.
Oh yeah, they do. But we should either get the good kind and pay a little more, or learn to make our own. You know, on our trip we always get yogurt because it's convenient. But you get yogurt that is fat-free yogurt. What in the world? It's just that the momentum of the fat-free industry is continues. And so people, I was over the other day at Biomark, I was waiting for my wife or something, and here's the milk case. There's zero fat milk, there's non-fat milk, there's low-fat milk, there's 2% milk, there's 4% milk, and there's whole milk. What's a person supposed to do?
Buy whole milk.
Well, no, raw milk, that's what you want.
Find
Yeah, if you're forced to.
Dairy, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're forced to do that. Yeah. And then I went out and got my milk last night. Came home and drank a cup of cream off the top. It's so good. Anyway, so it's a challenge. Okay, and then, you know, for most people, if they've got a good support system, they probably should begin by eliminating gluten. Or get 200-year-old wheat. But that's probably a different animal. But if you look at this under the second paragraph, Dangerous Grain by Braley, this guy listed up, I think, 183 different conditions directly associated with gluten sensitivity. And inability to concentrate, mental deterioration, mental lethargy, distractibility, intelligence deficits, dementia, ADHD, etc., and schizophrenia. All can be made worse by gluten. What a tragedy when someone gets put on medication for the rest of their life. Gluten. It's like the mechanic that keeps giving you a new set of tires because your front end's out of line. Oh, they're worn out again. We'll have to give you a new set of tires there.
Yeah.
But most of you are smarter than that. Just one, the outside edge of your tire is always bald and the inside is great. You know, it doesn't take a lot. Okay. Foods can cause just about any symptom. Okay, now let's assuming you've done all the things we just talked about. What can you do that's more proactive? more and more I'm convinced that I don't know why coconut oil is so important. There's probably other oils we could be getting locally that probably work as well, but no one's developed that idea. And so, for the time being, use coconut oil. I don't care how smart or how good your brain seems to be, and I won't pass judgment until I talk with the person you live with. Take coconut oil. I was at my daughter's house. She had a jar of coconut oil in her cupboard, and one of her children, 12-year-old, was getting a spoon. He was trying to get it out. You won't use it that way. It's a pain in the neck to get it out of those containers. You melt it. You put it on your stove and warm it up, and it pours like syrup. You pour it into a little dish, and you set it right there until you can get it easy. If you don't make it easy, you won't do it, because you should be taking 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 tablespoons of coconut oil a day.
Is it better than olive oil?
I think it is for brain function. I think both coconut oil and olive oil have their place, but I think coconut oil, there's studies talking about coconut oil and brain function. They say after one dose, 1 tablespoon, there's measurable improvement in brain function. And they're using it as a cancer treatment. It's called what's it called? The ketogenic diet, where they put people on something like 20 or 30 tablespoons of coconut oil a day. And you may have seen this movie called Lorenzo's Oil, where a kid with severe, intractable epilepsy, doctors were starting to think about operating on his brain, and so mom got the idea, high-fat diet. And she cured it.
Wow.
Yeah. So take it, put it out, use it instead of butter, or use 50-50 with butter. Put it in your soup, put it in your tea. If you're drinking coffee, put it in your coffee. Use it whenever you can. Stir fry with it. Just use it, put it out so it's convenient. Or you won't use it. One of my favorite snacks now is this Killer Dave's bread. You know, that's so satisfying. It's kind of expensive. You don't want to burn the toast. You put butter and coconut oil and peanut butter and honey on it. That's so good.
Oh, that's
It
good.
says you have gluten-free bread.
Well, if you got a gluten problem, then do it. But
You put all
butter
that
and
stuff on cardboard, it would probably still taste good.
it's very satisfying.
Yeah, yeah.
See, that you get a lot of oil in your diet. It suppresses your appetite because it takes a while for it to get out of your stomach. Carbohydrates go through quickly, but all that oil hangs around, and your brain thinks you're okay. But it's really good. It's very satisfying.
What was that again? Peanut butter and
I
coconut
put
oil.
peanut butter, Adam's crunchy peanut butter,
Yes,
and
yes.
coconut oil, and sometimes I don't put butter on it, sometimes I do. Depends on every town. Then I'll put I got some raw honey from a lady down Crestwell. And I'll put blackberry jam on it, whatever's convenient, whatever's there, I guess.
And all of the above. Yeah.
It is good. Or another good one is with avocado and coconut oil. And it's a little pesto. That's very good. Anyway, okay, coconut oil, do it.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
do it. Costco's got a great deal. You can go to Glory Bee down here. They've got a good deal. Start taking it. Okay, magnesium. Here, another magnesium, just very, very important. Niacinamide. You know, Linus Pauling, 30, 40 years ago, wrote a big book, and he and Abraham Hoffer were curing schizophrenics with niacin and vitamin C. They were leaving the hospitals. You remember a long time ago we had these epidemics of pellagra and beriberi and all these things. And one of the characteristics of pellagra is you get dementia. And what they cure that with? Niacin, or thiamine. B vitamin deficiencies. They thought they were infectious diseases, and they were B vitamin deficiencies. But we've kind of forgotten about that. We got, I don't know, Aleve and Aricept and Paxil and Wellbutrin. Okay, so take your niacinamide. And here again, the vitamin C, vitamin D, you know, all this stuff is documented on the on the alternative websites, and one that is well, turmeric, and turmeric, another critical one for a healthy brain function, because they're finding that depression is often an inflammatory condition in the brain, and turmeric's a wonderful anti-inflammatory substance. But here again, you got to take enough. Your baby bear portion isn't going to do you the right. Isn't going to work.
I noticed on your list here, you say phytosome. I've never heard of that before.
Well, it's an Ayurvedic herbal combination.
Okay.
It's adrenal gland support.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you have that next door too?
probably.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to keep that in store because adrenal fatigue is huge.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Adrenal fatigue is huge. Just because we're inundated with stress, and life is stressful.
What was the name of that substance?
It's called phytosome. Phytosone.
Oh, okay, phytosome.
Yeah. And here again, this may look overwhelming. Test it. Test each one of the things and find out which is appropriate for you and the right dose. That's almost as important as which one you start using. You've got to get your dosage right. So you learn to use intuitive testing. Now, I put in here, if you turn the page, you'll see this list of several front and back of all these other things you can read about that people advocate for the use of a healthy brain. And you see at the top of this sheet, you'll say, if you're trying to prevent a problem, the next column is to optimize cognitive function. If you have a memory impairment, or if you have some over the far right column, it's people that have been diagnosed with one of these conditions, Alzheimer's, dementia, schizophrenia, or something like that. Now here again, the list is overwhelming. And if you go to the antiagingsystems.com website, you can read about most of these. You go there and Google it, and you can read about these things. So if you want to know if one of these is appropriate for you, you can do it. The back of that page has got some other types of dietary modifications, stress control, body-mind exercises, and things like that. And the last little section I put in here are the traditional vitamins and minerals that can be helpful. And I think that you're going to find these more effective in the preventive column. Now there's one other page I wanted to cover. This, if you back up a couple pages, you'll come to GAPS, the gut and psychology syndrome. This is amazing. This isn't really new stuff. They've been talking about this, not with this label, for some time. 40, 50 years ago, a guy by the name of Irons, Dr. Irons, coined the phrase "death begins in the colon," because they understood that long ago, but now they've kind of rehashed it and they've come out with some new ideas, and we've learned more about why it's the health of the bowel is critical. And there was just recently a post about babies that are born through C-section are immediately handicapped, because the way it's supposed to work, you're supposed to have a healthy mom with a healthy gut, and when the baby comes through the birth canal, it's inoculated, because prior to that, amniotic fluid is essentially sterile. And so the baby gets inoculated as it comes through the birth canal, and then you put the baby on the mother's chest, and so the baby gets inoculated with the bacteria on her skin and the mold on her skin, and then the baby nurses, and the baby gets the colostrum, which is the initial inoculation of the gut, if it works right. And so now they're finding that as the percentage of C-sections goes up, this doesn't happen. And this sets the stage for most chronic diseases. They're actually starting to study where if a mother's going to have they say in Brazil something like 60+% of the babies are C-section babies. Up in this country, it's 40 or so percent. And what they're doing now is, in this study, they put a gauze pad in the mother's vagina, and leave it there for a day or two before the baby's born by C-section. And then when the baby's born, they take that sponge and rub the baby down and try and replicate what the baby normally would get. But they're finding it's critical in long-term health. The way we do it now, your baby born by C-section, they go into the nursery, they get nursed because the normal hormones for milk let down and all that stuff aren't there, and so mom has trouble feeding, and no one encourages mom to. It just, you wonder how. Then they get their cell phone right away. Don't they get them at 2 or 3 now?
Seems that way.
See, they want them at 3 or 4, and everybody else has got them. And so then I put in here a little blurb about the consequences of abnormal gut organisms, you know, acetaldehyde and neurotoxins and morphine-like substances. Just so anyway, bottom line there is, if you are worried, if you score 6 or 7 on one of these your mental state exams, eliminate gluten. And check out your hormone status. Do your temperature and maybe get a hormone level. You can go to, write down ZRT Labs. ZRT Labs, or just ZRT.com. And you contact them, and they have kits where you don't even have to get anybody's permission. Isn't that wonderful? You don't have to get permission to do this test. Doctors have a real, I talked to my sister the other day, she wanted me to ask me about the lab tests. I said, what are your results? Show me your results. Well, the doctor has them. I don't know, he won't tell me what they are until I go in and see him. Don't let them get away with that. Improve your digestion. Take your supplements that you need. Get the chemicals out of your diet and life as much as you can. Keep a journal. Learn to do intuitive testing. And here again, exercise. You need regular exercise. If you live in a 1-story home, you got to get some exercise. Because in a 1-story home, you don't exercise. You walk from here to here.
How many is your house?
Pardon?
How many stories is your house?
Well, if you count the basement, it's got 4. I tried to count how many times I go up and down a flight of stairs. I gave up. I guess I get 50 flights a day. Well, I don't know. You never know. See, I can't prove one way or another, but if you, so you have to compensate. If you got a 1-story home, don't sell it. Just figure out something. Get a stair climber. Get one of these little gadgets and discipline yourself so that when you watch TV, you don't let yourself do it unless you're on your stair climber. But just, it's brief interval exercise. I have a guy that he was 80-some years old, and he was in good health, and he was getting his testosterone, and he had prostate cancer, and he's doing great. And he had a protocol where he ran telephone poles. So he'd go out and he'd do he didn't just jog, he had to run between one telephone pole and the next, then he'd walk between one telephone pole and the next, then he'd run, then he'd walk. He was way ahead of his time. Now finally they come out and say, this long distance, you know, these guys go out and jog for 26, it's bad for your heart. It's bad. It's kind of a status symbol, and it's enjoyable. I used to run. It was fun. I kind of enjoyed it. I've never, anyway. Okay, do you have any questions about any of this? You got to read this stuff, and you got to get into it. You just got to do it.
Essential.
Pardon?
Essential.
Well, or else you better convince him, because you'll be taken care of.
I tell everybody.
Well, it is.
I think it is essential.
That's right. I think it really is essential, because we're getting to the point where I don't know what the percentage is, but a huge percent of the population is probably going to have some sort of dementia within a few years. But marijuana's okay.
Adderall.
Or Seth. One thing that we didn't touch much on, and is a substance called, they touch on it in here, it's called Depronil. It's one, and the other thing I found is a substance called, there's Depronil. There's a substance called methylene blue. Very interesting study. It's got the University of Oregon magazine that comes from the medical school, and they're talking about the research these people were doing on think it was the hairless mole. There's something about a hairless mole. He didn't age very rapidly. And so they're studying him. And at the same time, I happened to come across some research done on methylene blue. Now, methylene blue is a dye that's been around in the medical industry for probably 100 years. But methylene blue does the same thing this chemical in the hairless mole does. It prevents, see, the energy in your cell comes from a little thing called a mitochondria. And as we age, every cell has a mitochondria in it, in the nucleus or in cytoplasm, I can't remember, in the cytoplasm. And it's this thing called a mitochondria, and it's where energy is produced. Well, when the mitochondria age, the proteins in it aggregate, and it slows down the efficiency of the mitochondria. And so they found that this chemical in this hairless mole inhibited that aggregation. Well, methylene blue does the same thing. Methylene blue breaks up protein aggregation in the mitochondria. And it's dirt cheap. You can go online and get methylene blue. And I'm convinced, and I can't prove it, I did this in the slow down aging, I'm convinced if you take a little methylene blue, a drop or two of a 1% solution on a regular basis, but test it first, you'd slow down your aging of your brain. And you probably reverse it a little bit. And it's cheap, and it's safe. The only caution is, someplace I read you shouldn't take Depronyl and methylene blue at the same time. I don't know why they didn't go into it, but if you're taking one, maybe go back and forth.
You got any over there?
Methylene blue? No, I don't. We don't. But I got it on Amazon. And another great thing, well, I've mentioned this before, it's called Medic Lights. MEDICLITES or LIGHT. You just put it in, your computer will find it for you. It's a company that makes an ultraviolet irradiation that you stick up your nose. And it's got a red light that cleans the blood, that does almost the same thing. You just stick up your, it's painless. You stick up your nose, because the blood vessels up here in your nose are very close to the surface, and the capillaries are just 1 or 2 cells thick. That radiation goes in and cleanses the blood. And you put it in your nose for 20 minutes, once or twice, I don't know how often. And then they got another one with a little different frequency that irradiates the part of the brain that is damaged when you get Parkinson's disease. A little different wavelength, a little different, and you stick that up your nose and you treat your Parkinson's.
What was the name again of that?
It's called Medic, MEDIC Lights. Amazing. I mean, this technology is just super. And it runs on a AA battery. And yeah, it costs several $100s to get it. But ask a doctor, if you can find a doctor, naturopath might do it, that would do blood irradiation. You can't. Traditional doctors won't do it. Insurance companies won't cover it. But you can get it yourself. Cheap and safe. Lots of, you go to that website, you see all sorts of information about this stuff.
The kids might go for that. They won't go for
Something
soda
that's
or
simple.
hydrogen peroxide or
Well, no, they
iodine
won't.
or something like
Some
that.
kids might balk it,
Yeah.
sticking it up their nose, but it isn't uncomfortable. It isn't painful.
Do you
You've
know
done it?
anything about using Rife machines for disorders?
The Rife
Machines?
The Rife machine's been around a long time, and I actually met a guy that knew Dr. Raymond Rife, and saw one of his original bulbs. But, you know, I haven't had a lot of experience with it. But it was very, I read the book, it sounded very promising. If I had you can buy gadgets, they're called square wave generators. And you can get the books that say the frequencies that he had. You know, I don't know if they're legitimate, but if you're desperate.
Well, my daughter has Lyme disease, and she's been using the Rife machine for years, and she's lost all of her friends who were sick with Lyme disease before she got sick.
Well,
and she's
maybe,
still here, still
maybe working. Yeah, sure.
I have a son who has Lyme disease too, and I'm wondering if this
Well, go to the website and or send them a note. They're very. I had a question about one of them. I didn't read the information carefully, so I asked them a question that they already explained, and I got an email within a day.
You're talking about
Medic lights.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just great. We're blessed. We have access to all this stuff. Hemp oil, you know, overseas. So many of these medications that for years have been prescription stuff. And very, very safe. And you know, of course, there's some risk, but there's much greater risk, in my opinion. Much greater risk if you go to the doctor. Much, much, much greater. So that's my opinion. Okay, well, hang in there and keep reading, keep studying.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
One of the real problems you have, you know, with your daughter, you know, you sound like your daughter, she's using the right machine, they're going to be better off, but so many people, they just don't want to do it unless they get the approval of their doctor. And you got to let them go. You can't argue with them.
I just developed Lyme disease, and I ended up buying a Rife machine. And I thought, well, I could use it for whatever, you know, for myself, and then I'd loan it to him. But I don't think he's too interested.
Just let him suffer.
I wish you'd have told me I have a Rife machine.
Because
about
if
10 years
you
ago.
get it, you get in a big. If you get emotionally involved in converting them, it's not good for your relationship.
Well, I know.
Yeah.